Celine Vane had learned very early in life that some people are born into the light, and others are born into the shadow of someone else's mistakes. She was 22 years old, and every single day of those 22 years had been lived in that shadow. Her father, Marcus Vane, had once been the beta of Crescent Ridge Pack, a trusted, respected man who stood at the right hand of the Alpha. But Marcus was gone now, and all that remained of his name was the shame that had been tied to it like a stone around a drowning man's neck. Nobody spoke well of him. Nobody spoke of him at all, except in whispers, and the whispers were never kind. Celine never believed the things they said. She held her father's memory close and kept it clean in her heart, even when the rest of the world threw dirt on it. She was an Omega Wolf, which in the world of shifters meant she sat at the lowest place at every table. She served food at gatherings she was not invited to enjoy. She cleaned halls where she was not welcome to stand. She kept her eyes down, her voice soft, and her footsteps quiet. She had built her life around invisibility, because invisibility, she had learned, was the safest place to exist. The claiming ceremony changed everything. It was held once a year under the full moon, in the Stone Circle, an ancient place at the edge of the Crescent Ridge territory, surrounded by tall stone pillars carved with symbols older than anyone could read. Every unmated wolf in the pack was required to attend. It was the night when fated bonds revealed themselves, when the moon goddess allowed soul connections to rise to the surface and make themselves known. Celine had attended every year since she turned 18. Every year she stood at the far edge of the crowd, alone, and went home the same way she arrived. She did not expect this year to be any different. She wore a simple white dress like the others. She stood near the back of the crowd, as the moon climbed the sky and bathed the stone circle in pale silver light. Wolves around her began to feel the pull of recognition. Gasps, soft cries, pairs finding each other with wide, stunned eyes. She watched and felt nothing. She told herself she was used to it. Then, the Alpha King arrived. Draven Ashwood did not walk into a room. He commanded it simply by entering. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair, and eyes the color of storm clouds. He ruled not just Crescent Ridge, but all 12 packs across the continent, a responsibility that sat on him like armor, always present, never removed. He had not found his fated mate in 6 years of ceremonies, and every passing year made his council more anxious and more vocal about it. They wanted him to choose a queen from among the noble families. He had refused, every time. When the moon reached its highest point, Celine felt it. It arrived without warning, a deep, warm pull in the center of her chest, like a door inside her had quietly swung open. She pressed her hand against her ribs. The pull grew stronger. It had direction. It pointed across the circle like a thread drawn tight. She looked up. Draven Ashwood was already looking at her. For a moment, neither of them moved. The bond hummed between them, ancient and certain, the way the moon was certain, the way the tides were certain. It did not ask for permission. It simply was. And then she watched his expression change. She saw the exact moment he recognized it. She saw something shift in his eyes. Not warmth, not wonder, but something cold and complicated. He crossed the circle in long, deliberate strides. The crowd parted. People turned to watch. By the time he stopped in front of her, the entire gathering had gone quiet. He looked down at her. She looked up at him. The bond pulled like the current of a deep river. Then he spoke. I, Draven Ashwood, Alpha King of all packs, reject you, Celine Vane, Omega daughter of a traitor, as my fated mate. You are not worthy of this bond. You are not worthy of my name. The words landed like stones dropped into still water. The bond did not fade quietly. It broke with a sharp, invisible snap that stole the air from her lungs and sent a wave of cold pain through her chest. She pressed her hand harder against her ribs. Her knees almost gave way. She felt the crowd's eyes on her, some shocked, some quietly satisfied, some simply curious to see what she would do. She did not cry. She breathed through it. She straightened her spine, she lifted her chin, and she walked away. Through the crowd, through the parting gap of people who stepped aside without looking at her, and she walked out of the stone circle, alone with her head still up. It was the most dignified thing anyone at Crescent Ridge had ever witnessed, and not a single person said so out loud. The days that followed were physically painful. The broken bond left her weakened in ways that went beyond sadness. Her wolf instincts felt dulled, like a fire turned down low. She was given a small, cold room, and told she was fortunate to still have a place in the pack at all. The noble wolves who had previously ignored her now felt free to be openly unkind. She endured it. She had endured worse. But something strange began to happen at night. She started hearing a voice in her dreams. It did not sound like anyone she knew. It was soft and vast at the same time, the way the sky is soft and vast, gentle to look at, impossible to hold. It spoke words she did not understand at first, words in an old language that felt familiar anyway, like a song heard in childhood and almost forgotten. It called her Lunara. She woke from those dreams with silver light on her palms, faint, barely there, gone the moment she looked directly at it. She thought she was imagining it. She began sleeping with her hands tucked under her pillow. Then one afternoon, searching for something else entirely in the pack's old library, she found a book. It was thin and very old, its cover cracked, and its pages the color of dried leaves. It described the moon goddess, not as a figure of distant legend, but as an active presence in the world of wolves, one who chose, every few thousand years, to place her direct bloodline in a living wolf. This chosen one was called the Lunara, the true queen of wolves. Her power was said to surpass even that of an alpha king, not through force, but through connection. To the moon, to the earth, to every wolf alive. The last Lunara had lived 400 years ago. Celine read the signs described in the old pages. Silver light from the hands, dreams in the ancient language, and the one that made her sit very still in her chair and read the sentence 3 times. A fated bond that survives rejection. She reached, carefully, for the place in her chest where the bond had broken. It was not gone, it was quiet. It was folded up small, and waiting, like a seed in winter ground. She closed the book gently, and sat in the silence of the old library for a long time. Strange events had already begun at the pack borders. Warriors were returning from patrol with reports of corrupted wolves, rogues moving in groups, their eyes dark and hollow, not behaving the way wolves behaved. Ancient wardstones along the border were crumbling, their carvings worn smooth overnight, as though years of weather had happened in hours. Draven's most experienced fighters could not hold the line the way they always had. The elders called it the Hollow, an old darkness, described in texts almost no one read anymore, that arose when something sacred had been broken or denied. It was not an enemy you could fight with strength alone. It was a wound in the world. Meanwhile, Celine could no longer pretend the silver light was her imagination. It came when she felt things deeply, grief, or anger, or compassion. It rose from her hands like breath rising in cold air. One evening, a young warrior was brought back from the border in terrible condition, too hurt to be helped by anything the pack healer tried. Celine had been there by chance, delivering something from the kitchen. She knelt beside him without thinking. She placed her hands on his arms. The silver light poured out of her like water. The warrior sat up 2 minutes later, completely healed. The room went completely silent. Nobody said anything. Nobody moved. They just looked at her, and she looked at her own hands, and nobody knew what to do with any of it. She kept reading the old books. She kept hearing the voice at night. Her wolf, the small, quiet Omega wolf that everyone had dismissed as insignificant, began growing in her dreams, becoming something vast and silver-white and blazing, something that made the ground feel small. The dark moon convergence arrived without warning, in the way that major things sometimes do. Suddenly, undeniably, too large to ignore. It was an event described only in the oldest records, occurring once every 500 years. Every alpha across all 12 packs felt the pull toward the stone circle simultaneously, and could not explain why. They arrived to find Celine already there. She stood at the center of the circle. Silver light moved around her like a living thing. Her eyes were bright white. Her wolf hovered around her like a second form, enormous and luminous. The moon goddess came. She did not arrive gently. The sky changed. The ground vibrated. The stone pillars of the circle blazed with light in every carved groove. Her presence was not a shape so much as a force, immense and ancient and completely certain of itself. When she spoke, every wolf present felt the words in their bones. She said that the bloodline had not been lost. She had hidden it herself, in the one place that pride would prevent anyone from looking. In the Omega, in the daughter of the man they had called a traitor, in the woman who had been rejected in front of everyone and had walked away with her head up. She named Selene as the Lunara. She looked at Draven when she spoke her final words. She told him that he had rejected something sacred and that he would spend the remainder of his life earning what he had thrown away, or he would watch everything he had built crumble without her. Then she was gone. The sky returned to normal. The night was very quiet. Every alpha present turned to look at Selene. Draven stood across the circle from her. She looked back at him with calm, clear eyes, not with longing and not with bitterness. She looked at him the way someone looks at a problem that has a solution, if enough work is done. The Hollow chose that moment to breach the circle. Corrupted wolves poured in from the dark edges of the tree line, more than anyone had anticipated. The alphas fought hard. The warriors held as long as they could. But the Hollow was not something that could simply be overpowered. Selene stepped forward. She raised her hands, and the silver light rose with her, traveling outward through the ground, through the roots of the ancient trees, through the carved stones of the pillars. Every ward along every border of every pack blazed back to life at once. The darkness at the edges of the circle retreated. The corrupted wolves dissolved where the light touched them, not destroyed but released, returned to something clean. When it was over, she dropped to one knee. The effort had taken almost everything she had. The silver light dimmed. The world tilted. She felt hands catch her before she fell. Draven had crossed the circle. He held her upright, his hands steady, his face close to hers. The moment he touched her, the bond, the one he had tried to end, the one that had been sleeping in the cold ground of her chest all this time, came roaring back. It flooded through both of them with the force of a river breaking through ice. She felt it. She knew he felt it too, by the expression on his face. Something cracked open there, something honest. She let him hold her up. She did not lean into him. Not yet. In the weeks that followed, Selene was formally recognized as Lunara and true Queen of Wolves by all 12 packs. The title did not come from Draven's permission or his council's approval. It came from something far older and far more certain than any of them. She began the work, learning the old rituals, traveling to the border wards, meeting with pack leaders who had never in their lives expected to bow their heads to an Omega woman from a disgraced family. She carried it all without arrogance and without hesitation. She had spent her whole life being underestimated. She knew exactly how to let that work in her favor. Draven did not assume. He did not declare. He came to her with something she had not expected, the truth about her father. Marcus Vane had not been a traitor. He had discovered that certain members of Draven's own council had known about the dormant bloodline in his family and had arranged his death to prevent it from ever surfacing. He had been killed for knowing something that frightened powerful men. Draven laid that information before her, along with the names of those responsible, and told her she could decide what came next. She decided. Justice was done. Her father's name was restored to the pack records with full honor. It was a quiet ceremony, witnessed by only a few. Selene stood through it without tears, with her back straight and her hands still. Draven courted her slowly and without expectation. He showed up. He listened. He learned to speak less and hear more. He did not ask her to forgive what he had done in that circle. He simply kept choosing, every day, to be the kind of man who did not need to be forgiven for the same mistake twice. The bond remained between them, present, patient, neither demanding nor disappearing. She felt it every time he was near. She knew he felt it too. But Selene understood something important that she suspected Draven was still learning. A bond was not a promise. A bond was a beginning. What came after it had to be chosen, again and again, freely and honestly. On the night of the next full moon ceremony, the first held with a recognized Lunara in 400 years, the stone circle was filled with wolves from every pack. The pillars glowed with their restored carvings. The air was cool and smelled of pine and moonlight. Selene stood at the center. Draven Ashwood, Alpha King of all 12 packs, walked across the circle and stopped in front of her. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he went to one knee. He did not say he was claiming her. He did not say she belonged to him. He simply asked, quietly and plainly, if she would let him stand beside her. She reached down and took his hand and brought him to his feet. The bond between them shone like the moon above. Not because it had always been easy, not because it had not cost them both something real, but because what remained after all of it was something neither of them had simply received. It was something they had built. And the true Queen of Wolves looked at the man beside her, and the silver circle blazed, and for the first time in her life, Celine Vane felt exactly where she was supposed to be.